This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. Police and family members have been searching a park in northeast Winnipeg looking for a senior who has dementia and is missing. CBC's Gavin Axelrod was there this afternoon.
This is Buns Creek Centennial Park, a frequent walking trail for Earl Moberg. But he hasn't been seen in 2 days. And now, his family is pleading with the public for help finding the 81-year-old.
Oh, even though he's 81 years old, he's in good physical shape, and he's a walker. And he's been known to walk 10K from his house to Kildonan Place. I don't know if he's done that in the last year, and with dementia, he can go 2 blocks now and doesn't know where he is.
Moberg's brother Doug says he has dementia and may be confused or disoriented. His brother's phone was pinged off a cell tower near the park 2 days ago. Moberg's son Kurt also says he's worried about his father's well-being and that it gets harder to be optimistic as the days go by.
I've been looking for him like every day since he was gone, all over the place. Just because I talked to him last, and he just kind of what little he told me, I'm going by trying to follow those clues to where he was, but yeah, it's really hard to.
Police say Moberg was wearing a dark blue or green parka at the time of his disappearance Tuesday evening. Meanwhile, they're continuing to look for the missing man. And a group of volunteers will also be out to comb the area tomorrow. Gavin Axelrod, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Manitoba's premier is following through on a campaign promise to stop mailing out education tax rebate checks. But Kinew is holding off on the second part of that campaign promise. CBC's Bartley Kivas joins us now live in the newsroom with more on this. So what was this promise, Bartley?
Well, during the election campaign, NDP leader Kinew promised to continue with the 50% provincial property tax rebates brought in by the former PC government. At the same time, Kinew promised to change the way they were done. The PC government mailed out property tax rebate checks once a year. Kinew called that confusing because sometimes one person would get rebates intended for multiple people who paid the taxes. So starting next year, the government will simply reduce the provincial education portion of the property taxes on their annual tax bills. Those bills are mailed out in Winnipeg in June. That means Winnipeg property owners who make monthly payments will start seeing lower bills in July.
You are going to save money each and every month. Now, instead of waiting to mail you a check from the government when it suits us, we're instead just going to apply this rebate of 50% on your school taxes right onto your property tax bill.
Kinew says the province still has to work out the details with every municipality in Manitoba, but he says this will save the province $500,000 in postage that would have been spent on those checks.
So what part of this promise did Kinew fail to fulfill, Bartley?
In opposition, Kinew also criticized the rebates for benefiting owners of more expensive properties, so he promised to stop giving these tax rebates to what he called billionaire out-of-province property owners. Today, Kinew said that won't happen anytime soon.
This is one of the things that you say in opposition and then you get into government and it's a bit more challenging, so we're still working on that, to be frank.
Kinew says while it's easy to figure out who is a billionaire, it's complicated to figure out the details. The opposition PCs seized upon this comment.
You know, it's shocking to hear that the NDP say it's actually difficult to be in government. It's not shocking to hear that saying that they can't fulfill their promises that they promised in going into this campaign.
Abhikan also said he feared the NDP won't continue with the tax rebates after 2024. Janet.
Thank you, Bartley. That's the CBC's Bartley Kivas reporting live from the newsroom tonight. A Winnipeg police officer is facing charges of impaired driving. Police got a call last Friday night about a suspected impaired driver who had just left a business on Henderson Highway in North Kildonan. A 39-year-old was identified as an off-duty member and was arrested a short time later. Constable Alexei Gerasimchuk has now been charged with impaired driving. He's a 2-year member of the police service. And it is the end of an era. In Winnipeg, Scott Bathgate Limited, which owns Nutty Club Candies, is closing. Nutty Club Candies, which include Scotch mints, humbugs, and those red pearled peanuts, have been a staple at corner stores in this country since the 1930s. The iconic red and white Nutty Club man has been painted on the side of this building in downtown Winnipeg for decades. The company's president says the competitive international environment has evolved to where the business can no longer sustainably operate. The company says it will work through its existing inventory to fill orders, but will close for good by the end of January. Thompson's airport is sinking due to climate change. The Thompson Regional Airport Authority has received a $52 million loan to help with much-needed redevelopment of the airport. The loan comes from the Canada Infrastructure Bank. Construction is currently underway on a new terminal. The current terminal is sinking into the ground. Runways and aprons are sloping. The airport authority's CEO says the airport sits on permafrost that is melting, a direct result of climate change.
It has sunk so much on the end of the building. On the one end, the ground has continued to sink so much that you can now start to see daylight outside the building in locations like aprons. Our aprons, normal aprons for aviation, you're supposed to have 2% slope. We've had to close sections of our apron. We've got 10 to 15% slopes happening. So we've had to close those sections of aprons.
Curtis Ross says they've had to drill more than 500 geotechnical holes to find solid ground for the new airport. It will be almost 4 times bigger than the current one. Total cost is expected to be $125 million. Ross says the new airport should be operational by late 2025. For the second time in a week, Winnipeg Mayor Scott Gillingham has given a warning about a new financial crunch facing the city. CBC's Cameron McLean joins us now from the newsroom to tell us more. Cameron, what's the mayor warning about now?
This time, it's about transit. Last week, Gillingham said high inflation and labor costs mean there won't be much new spending on services or construction projects. He outlined projected budget shortfalls for Winnipeg Transit. This year, the city expects to spend almost $20 million more on transit than it estimated a few years ago. In 4 years, that gap will grow to almost $37 million. Gillingham says the city will do everything it can to maintain services, but he warned other spending may have to be cut back.
I'm not saying there's any cuts to services at this point, but I'm just saying that to Winnipeggers, to stakeholders, we are having to make very difficult budget decisions through this process. And so the city is not flush with funds.
Gillingham attributes the extra operating costs to rising fuel prices, lower ridership, and subsidized transit fares for low-income riders.
Does the mayor have any idea where the extra money is going to come from?
He didn't say. Covering the funding gap would be equivalent to a 5% property tax increase, but the mayor says he's sticking to his promise of a 3.5% increase next year.
Now, there are concerns about another source of income for the city, aren't there?
Police Board Chair Marcus Chambers wants the province to review regulations around photo radar enforcement. In 2002, legislation prescribed the specific technology used in the system, which is now out of date.
So this technology itself has to be updated, and then looking at locations where, back in 2002, there are whole neighborhoods and communities that didn't exist within the city of Winnipeg.
Police Chief Danny Smythe says outdated technology is affecting the service's ability to enforce speeding and red light offenses. The province had committed to a review of the photo radar program in 2019, but those plans were scrapped due to the pandemic. The province didn't answer when asked when that review might happen. The Public Works Committee will vote on Chambers' motion at its next meeting in January. Janet?
Thank you so much. That's CBC's Cam McLean reporting. It's being called a historic announcement. The RCMP and Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs agreed to work together to address violence against Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQ people. They say they will find ways to incorporate the calls for justice, the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, made into policing. Grand Chief Kathy Merrick of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs says it's time to come together to tackle gender-based violence.
I sincerely believe that through a thoughtful partnership, a nurturing understanding of our people, Manitoba will set the standard for reconciliation in this country.
RCMP called the statistics alarming. Indigenous women are 6 times more likely to become victims of homicide than non-Indigenous women. The first meeting of the Joint Action Circle will occur in February. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Canada is moving Christmas. In fact, next Wednesday, it will officially adopt the revised Julian calendar for all liturgical dates. That means in Canada, Ukrainian Christmas shifts from January 7th to December 25th. CBC's Zubina Ahmed has reaction.
This is called a didu. It's wheat that we put on the table at Christmas, and wheat is like really symbolic.
Michelle Kowalczyk is a second-generation Ukrainian Canadian. She's already shopping for some traditional Ukrainian Christmas decorations like a duduk. Many like her are dealing with the news that the Christmas date is about to be dramatically changed. Kowalczyk is still adjusting.
So this year, we're actually going to still do our Christmas on January 6th because it's a bit late to make a change, but we'll probably spend that time talking about what we're going to do for next year because, we need to kind of move forward with this change.
Earlier this year, Ukrainian President Zelensky signed a law moving his country's official Christmas day to December 25th from January 7. The aim was to abandon the Russian heritage due to the ongoing war. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Canada agreed to adopt that change as of December 20th.
Fairly large majority of people, so it seems, members of parishes in Canada felt likewise that they would like to see the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Canada adopt the revised Julian calendar.
Kowalczyk says she has mixed feelings between preserving old traditions and opposing the ongoing war.
We have a lot of empathy for our Ukrainian brothers and sisters that are coming from Ukraine and for those still in Ukraine, and we want to kind of be aligned with that. But on the other hand, for those of us who've been celebrating on the old calendar all of our lives, it's a big change, and it's with some mixed feelings that we're going to move ahead and make this change.
The Holy Trinity Ukrainian Orthodox Metropolitan Cathedral in Winnipeg will be celebrating Christmas twice this year to help the families slowly transition.
The reaction in the parish is mixed, and understandably so. This is a huge change, a monumental change in our psychology and in the way we've done things for generations and that. But it is a change that will be embraced. It will take time. Completely.
For Ukrainians who moved to Canada years ago, as well as for many newcomers, the tradition of celebrating Christmas on January 7 has always been a way to preserve their identity and culture. But despite that, many are embracing this new change. Zubina Ahmed, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Meteorologist John Sauter joins us once again on another really warm December day.
Yeah, we were just talking how we should have taken a break from the computer and gone outside just for
a walk, just to stand there and go, what is going on?
Because these days are numbered, right? So
right, they are. Speaking of numbers, did we break any records?
We did, north and south, and there's one very significant one in the north that I'm going to tell you about in a second. First of all, the temperatures this afternoon look like this at 3 o'clock. And notice in the north, everyone just above zero. 1s, 2s, a 2 in Churchill. That's not the high today. It was actually higher than that, but we've got 5 degrees around Morden and Winkler. It was 4 or 5 degrees in the southeast corner of the province, 4 degrees degrees in Sprague, 3 in Kenora, 4 in Red Lake, and 3 here in the Winnipeg area, and a pair of 4s out in Saskatchewan. Now, the records, there were a few of them. Flin Flon, the Paw, breaking records from 1997 and 2018. This one from a couple of years ago at Gimli Harbor, but 2 degrees plus above that old record temperature. Churchill, check this out, 3.7 today. The old record was minus 3.4, and it was only last year, and that's over 7 degrees higher than last year. So it's interesting that 2 years in a row you would break a record on the same date. And Gillam also broke a record from 1998. We do have things changing along the Hudson Bay coast, though. A wind warning is in effect for this evening and overnight, and mainly for the Churchill region and the York region. So right along the Hudson Bay coast, where winds will be gusting to 90 kilometers per hour out of the northwest. And 90 kilometers per hour is the threshold in Manitoba for a wind warning. So that wind will settle down a little bit tomorrow, but it'll still be gusting to 60 in Churchill, and your temperature will likely be about 20 degrees cooler. Unbelievable how much cooler it's going to be along that northeastern section of the province. Here, a little bit cooler tomorrow. This is a look at satellite and radar, and there's really nothing on radar to help out the cross-country skiers, the snowmobilers, and boy, you're looking for more snow, and there really isn't much in the forecast, just clear skies as we head into the night tonight. South winds at 28 at the moment, and we're still at +1 in Winnipeg after that 3-degree high. Futurecast looking at very clear conditions overnight tonight. Watching this system as we head into the later part of Friday and, well, tonight into Friday. And that system is staying south of the border, but it's a mess. Through areas like Fort Frances, Ontario, you'll see rain, snow, and freezing rain tonight, and that won't even get as far north as Kenora. The rest of us through the day Friday will just see a little bit of an increasing amount of cloud later in the day. Saturday, we've got an accumulating snow, 5 to maybe 7 centimeters moving across the north. Barely any of that reaches southern Manitoba, even on into Sunday. So the forecast for tonight, -6. The normal low would be -20. That's your morning temperature and your morning condition, and we'll see some of this cloud cover drifting in the afternoon, +1 with that sun cloud mix and a northeast wind at 10. And we're still mild, but Sunday is cooler at -4, and winds will be gusting to 50 on Sunday, Janet, so it will feel a little more like winter on Sunday.
Okay, thank you so much, John.
You bet.
40 years ago, Michelle Harrison and her friend had a dream. They wanted to grant wishes for Manitoba kids facing life-threatening illnesses. At the time, no one else in Canada was doing that. But when they helped Jamie, a little boy with a brain tumor, meet Wayne Gretzky, they knew they were onto something special. Today, that organization is called the Dream Factory, and it's helped make memories for almost 900 kids and their families. But now, Michelle is facing a terminal illness of her own, lung cancer, and she has a wish.
You know, I wanted to create a goal to raise $60,000 to grant wishes in the future for children on the wait list with life-threatening illnesses at the Dream Factory. I set a goal, it was very high, but I'm hoping that through support from the community and through various social media campaigns that we can, you know, that this fund could be created. So sometimes the wishes are incredibly simple, sometimes they're very poignant. You know, a young woman who lost her leg to cancer, her family kicked her out because of it, and she wanted to meet family in England. And we flew her over there, and they ended up having her live there, and she passed away with her family in England.
These kids go through so much.
You know, and I've been at the bedside of some of these children because they wanted me there. And what I learned was children have a very different, of course, a different view. They haven't been necessarily made to fear it as we get older. I mean, it's a fear that we all have. They wanted to be perfectly honest. They wanted to talk about it. They wanted to talk about how they were feeling. And the fact that they were very peaceful about it, very accepting. And that's what I've learned in my own experience now that I'm applying to it. With the gift of friends and family, and my daughter in particular, we have a GoFundMe campaign. that people can Google Michelle Harrison GoFundMe, and it will come up. And so people can donate or share it, whatever they feel comfortable in doing, because of course, the more it gets shared, the more opportunity that we have to get closer to our goal.
More civilian lives are being lost as Israel continues its bombardment of the Gaza Strip in its war against Hamas militants. The latest in the story is coming up. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. Winnipeg-born and raised peace activist Vivian Silver is being mourned by friends and colleagues right here in Winnipeg tonight. Silver was born here, but she moved to Israel in 1973, where she devoted her life to peace work. Her family initially believed she'd been kidnapped and was being held hostage by Hamas after the militant group's violent assaults on Israel, October 7th. Her remains were found at the kibbutz where she lived in the south of Israel, but they were only identified 5 weeks later. Vivian Silver was 74 years old. Brittany Greenslade spoke with Silver's 2 sons tonight about why it was important to travel from Israel to Winnipeg for this memorial.
This was sort of her home, our home away from home. We would spend summers here. When we heard the Jewish Federation is organizing a memorial, it was very important for us to have the chance to come be with our family here, where she grew up, where she spent her formative years. Feels like an extension of the grieving process that we had in Israel, and also.
Jonathan, in one of your previous interviews, you said she was small in stature, but she was a giant. What did you mean by that?
I think she had this duality to her that she was small and also seemed fragile and sensitive and soft, but she was also very assertive, and she had a really strong center and even stubbornness. And she was fierce for what she believed in.
Vivian Silver's memorial will be held at 7:30 tonight at the Rady Center. In the region today, Israel continues its bombardment of the Gaza Strip, looking to flush out Hamas militants. But as the war claims innocent lives, the U.S. wants Israel to better protect civilians. Chris O'Neill Yates has more.
This video released by the Israeli Defense Force appears to show that these are Hamas fighters, some holding their green Palestinian ID cards. This pile, their weapons surrendered outside a hospital in northern Gaza. Israel's bombardment of the entire Gaza Strip has continued relentlessly. This freelance video was shot for CBC News Today in Rafah. The IDF announced it would suspend fighting in the Al Salam neighborhood so displaced Gazans could get much needed food and water. Fighting resumed after 4 hours. In the daily race against time, hope runs out of finding survivors in the rubble. Overnight in Jabalia, northeast of Gaza City, the fighting carried on through the night until morning, says this man, targeting an entire residential block. Amidst the destruction, disease and hunger are taking hold, according to the head of the UN's Palestinian Refugee Agency, UNRWA. Many Gazans have been without food for up to 3 days. Enough humanitarian aid isn't getting in, and people are becoming more desperate.
We are teetering on the edge of a possible implosion. We might reach our limit. Why? Because there is more and more a breakdown of a civil order.
U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is in Israel for talks, as a rift seems to be developing between the two countries. President Joe Biden has said Israel is losing support over indiscriminate bombing. The Israeli defense minister said it will take time to eliminate Hamas.
It will take and require a long period of time. It will last more than several months. But we will win and we will destroy them.
With any hope of a ceasefire out of reach, the Hamas-run health ministry says more than 179 people have been killed over the past day, putting the number of dead since the fighting began at nearly 19,000. Chris O'Neill Yates, CBC News, St. John's.
Russian President Vladimir Putin held his first major news conference today since sending troops into Ukraine almost 2 years ago. He says Moscow's war objectives remain unchanged, with no peace until Russia's goals are met. This comes as Putin seeks re-election in March. Briar Stewart has more.
These are the kind of moments Vladimir Putin relishes, front and center at a curated event designed to instill confidence. For more than 4 hours, Putin answered questions, including those carefully selected from the public. One came from an AI-generated image of himself, as he was asked about whether or not he uses body doubles. A poke at the regular rumors that swirl online, suggesting Putin uses stand-ins. "By the way, it's my first double," he replied. The event was carried live across Russia. There were several questions about the economy and, of course, about Ukraine. Last year, the annual town hall was cancelled in the wake of mounting military losses, which included Ukraine recapturing the city of Kherson. But this year, the situation is much different. After months of fighting, Ukraine's top general has admitted that Kyiv's counteroffensive failed to achieve its objectives.
President Zelensky, what does it mean if you don't get aid by the end of the year?
Financial and military support from the U.S., one of Ukraine's biggest backers, appears to be faltering, meaning the supply of weapons and ammunition could slow drastically.
Actually, they have been importing things for free, freeloading, but it will come to an end sooner or later.
Putin said it wasn't necessary to launch a new round of mobilization, but he was not asked when the hundreds of thousands of men who were sent to Ukraine can return home. In recent weeks, many Russian women have taken to social media demanding answers, and they're angry they haven't received any. Like Victoria, we've agreed to not identify for her own safety. They think we will remain silent and wait for a miracle, she said. People will not wait. Putin didn't answer the question she submitted, and this Russian law professor says the event wasn't designed to inform, but to send a message.
Two things. I'm controlling everything, and everything is okay. That's all.
A reminder to Russians that the man who has been in power for more than 2 decades should stay there. And this spring, he will almost certainly be voted in once again. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
A House of Commons committee has recommended House Speaker Greg Fergus be punished but not fired. Opposition parties want him to resign after a video surfaced of him paying tribute to a Liberal colleague. As Marina von Stackelberg reports, this comes amid fresh allegations of current and past speakers breaking the rules of being nonpartisan.
Greg Fergus started in his speaker seat this morning, but was promptly replaced. So a report could be released of whether he should lose his job. A House of Commons committee has recommended Fergus apologize and pay a fine, but not step down.
It's such a great opportunity to speak about my longtime friend, John Fraser.
This is the video that spurred calls for him to leave. Fergus, in his speaker's office, in his speaker's attire, paying tribute to the outgoing leader of the Ontario Liberal Party. In Canada, the Speaker is supposed to be impartial and act as a referee in the House of Commons. Now, the Conservatives say they have proof this isn't the only time Fergus broke the rules.
There is evidence of another partisan activity that the Speaker was engaged with.
This photo on Instagram shows Fergus a month ago at a cocktail fundraiser for a Liberal member of Quebec's legislature.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is not even the Speaker's riding. This is a neighboring riding. It's billed as a cocktail with activists or volunteers.
Fergus's office responded in a statement, writing, "The Speaker's attendance at this event precedes the introduction of a rigorous new protocol. Mr. Fergus was simply in attendance at this free event, which is in his riding."
I've gotten to know Arpan over the past few years.
This all comes after CBC News reported that Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer broke the rules. He was fined $500 for using Parliament resources to film a video endorsing a Conservative by-election candidate.
I note that Andrew Scheer did the same kind of partisan fundraising after his election as Speaker.
The NDP point to Scheer attending Conservative fundraising events back when he was the Speaker under the previous Conservative government.
The message has to be all speakers from now on, regardless of the party, cannot act in this way, either partisan, wearing their robes, or participating in a partisan fundraiser.
While the NDP and the Liberals want Greg Fergus to keep his job, the Conservatives and the Bloc Québécois still want him out. This comes as the House of Commons is set to break at the end of this week, with MPs heading home to their ridings for the next 6 weeks. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
The Canadian Real Estate Association has released its latest data for home sales in November. The numbers show home sales fell 0.9% nationally. Now, CREA tracks housing prices in 3 Manitoba communities: Winnipeg, Brandon, and Portage la Prairie. The price of the average house in Winnipeg went up roughly 1% compared to a year ago. In Brandon, it increased by more than 6% over November 2022. But in Portage la Prairie, hang on to your hats. CREA says the cost of an average home there jumped 37.5% from a year ago. Coming up, what if you could create the perfect Christmas tree grown to have the perfect shape, perfect color, perfect aroma? A team of scientists is trying to do just that. We'll tell you why when we return. The traditional balsam fir is getting a boost from technology. So-called smart Christmas trees are being developed to have consistently good shape, color, and scent. Apparently, they'll also be better adapted to climate change. Nancy Russell takes a closer look.
It is meticulous work, creating a smart Christmas tree. The research started at Dalhousie University's Truro campus, then came here to Phytocultures, a biotech company on PEI, to bring it from the lab to commercial production. It hasn't been easy.
The biggest challenge is getting each of these genetic lines to work the same and to work predictably. So my biggest challenge is getting them all on the right schedule and figuring out how they tick.
Robin Kelly says they are taking the best of the balsams and trying to grow identical copies. Smart also because they look and smell good, and the needles stay on longer, making them easier for Nova Scotia tree growers to ship across North America. Some of the first smart Christmas trees have been growing here on Nova Scotia's South Shore.
Some are doing great, some are doing less than great. Just average, but we're trying to weed out the worst and pick out the best. It's science. There's always a junkyard in the science world, right?
Here at Phytocultures, the company has also started its own balsam fir project, looking for trees that will be better suited for any changes in growing conditions caused by climate change. But all of the trees are going to take time.
They'll go out to market in 2026, not as a marketable tree, but as a transplant for the Christmas tree producers. And following that, it could be 6 to 8 or 10 years, or 12 years even, before those trees make it to market. You could use the old tree adage, what's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago.
Members of the Christmas Tree Council of Nova Scotia will get first dibs on the smart trees, but Phytocultures is planning to produce 300,000 seedlings this season, so they say more should be available for other growers very soon. The price tag for the project so far is about $8 million.
Little impatient, but very optimistic.
When we see that we're on the right track, it's a great feeling.
A joint PEI Nova Scotia effort that could someday be the center of holiday celebrations across North America. Nancy Russell, CBC News, Clyde River.
Weather Update is brought to you by the Art and Beauty of the National Ballet of Ukraine. January 29th at the Burton Cummings Theatre. Tickets at nationalballetukraine.com.
Meteorologist John Sauter joining us on another gorgeous, clear night.
Yeah, lots going on in the sky. We have the Geminid meteor shower. I did see some comments online and saying that they saw 3, 4 of them, even as early as 7:30 in the evening. And tonight, it's more of a peak. Last night, though, we saw this. Abby, who is a viewer, but actually works here, Adeyemi, and he took a picture of the Northern Lights, and this is over Winnipeg, and there were lots of reports of these Northern Lights being pretty cool, and could see that again tonight. As you're looking for falling stars and things like that, you probably could see some Northern Lights at the same time. Once again, it's the Geminid meteor shower. I think last night I had August in here, but it is December 13th, 14th, and really tonight is the peak. And if you can get away from the city lights, you'll be having a much better chance of seeing them. Now, that graphic did say 120 per hour. There's potential there, but you'll always have your back to some of them, so it doesn't mean you're going to see that many. It just gives you a better chance of seeing a few here and there. So good luck if you're heading outside later. These are the current numbers around the region: 2 in Eli and at the Forks. -4, though, in Selkirk, +1 in Morris and Steinbach. It certainly was a warm day. Cooler in the west. Don't often see that when the ridge is out to the western side of the province, but certainly cooler as we head into the evening with a -7 in Brandon. And across the north, we've gone from that almost 4 degrees in Churchill to a -4 already, and it's still above 0 in Thompson and areas right out through the west, and even in Gillam and Island Lake we're 0 or +1. So there's a look at the clear skies for tonight. If you are in the Fort Francis area, that system I've been watching rolling through Minnesota moved some snow and rain and freezing rain into your region, but that's about it. Farther north, it is just a clear to partly cloudy sky through the overnight period. Same with the southeast, -6 in Winnipeg, lots of -6s, a -7 at Lac du Bonnet, Pinawa. And same true out into the southwest, where Brandon right now is at your forecast low of -7. This is what it looks like across the north. We've got that wind warning along the Hudson Bay coast, so winds at 60 to 90 kilometers tonight. A much colder day in Churchill tomorrow, so almost 4 degrees today, -15 with a gusty northwest wind tomorrow. And you can see how much cooler it is, but still sunny out onto the east side of northern Manitoba. Still -1s and -2s in the west. And here in the south, a cool cooler day, but still well above seasonal. And we'll see a sun cloud mix, even building cloud cover as we head into the later part of the day, the late afternoon and on into the evening. Conditions across northwestern Ontario tomorrow fairly cloudy as well. Janet?
Thank you, John. Premier Wab Kinew was in our radio studio today to talk about this: healthcare, emergency rooms, what is happening with Manitoba's deficit, his plan to tackle homelessness. A wide-ranging conversation when we come back. You're watching CBC. It's been nearly 2 months since Wab Kinew was sworn in as Manitoba's 25th premier. But as you heard him say a little earlier in the program, being in government is different than being in opposition. Today he joined Emily Brass on Information Radio to talk progress and pitfalls.
What we've seen, and because of the decisions made by the previous government, is that there's just a lot that needs to get cleaned up in the way healthcare is administered. The people on the front lines are doing heroic work. They're doing their best, but we just don't have the right mix of resources in place to meet you, the patient, when you show up at an emergency room, when you get referred for a surgery, when you get referred for an MRI. And so this is going to take a long time to fix. But in the first couple months, our health minister and the rest of our team have done some really important work to bring a mobile MRI into place for northern Manitoba, to add more surgical capacity at the Grace and Concordia, to invest in beds at the hospitals that have emergency rooms, because the waits in the ER are caused by and large by not having beds in the rest of the hospital for people to move out of the ER and then get the care in that other part of the hospital. So we're setting about a plan to make these investments, but we also know that if you look at healthcare in Manitoba, we're spending more money than ever. And yet the outcomes for you, the patient, are getting worse. Wait times are growing, right? So something needs to change. And that's why we talk about culture, because we're dealing with a workforce, the nurses, the staff, the physicians, the healthcare professionals, who by nature are willing to go above and beyond. That's their calling. However, when we disrespect them, when we don't respect their expertise, when we take decision-making power away from them on the front lines, that leads to disillusionment, it leads to burnout, it leads to people leaving the workforce. And so we're going to focus on the culture of healthcare, meaning respecting the front lines, listening to their suggestions, and then implementing those fixes locally.
I mean, that's a big number, $1.6 billion. I mean, what kind of tax hikes might we see in light of this deficit and all the promises, including cutting the gas tax for 6 months starting in January?
Well, we are making good on our election promises. You know, when I go to Home Depot or Walmart and people, stop and share some encouraging words, one of the things that they often say is that we think you're going to keep your promises. And that matters to people. Yesterday, in advance of the press conference we held, we had a technical briefing where we invited every journalist, any columnist, anyone into the building to sit down, not with the politicians, but with the finance department and Treasury Board staff, and ask any question you want. Poke and prod at these numbers. These are real numbers. For folks who watch this issue carefully, I will say this. Look at the Manitoba provincial debt to GDP ratio. It has deteriorated as a result of this being a real deficit number. This is not inflated. This is the number that we walked into when we formed government. Now for us, we have to have a balanced approach, which does mean wrangling with this deficit number left to us by the PCs, but we still have to move ahead with investing in healthcare. Mm-hmm. This is the number one priority for people in Manitoba. And of course, in the long run, one of the important solutions is going to be to grow the economy. So we still have to make those necessary investments in terms of creating a brighter future for tomorrow.
And another priority for some people is homelessness in Manitoba. We know 2 people died earlier this week in a tent in Point Douglas. And Housing, Addictions and Homelessness Minister Bernadette Smith says she doesn't want to open any more shelters. She says they're a Band-Aid fix. So what solutions are you proposing and when?
It's really sad when we hear people losing their lives in this kind of way. I think all of us, just on the level of humanity, when we drive by bus shacks or we see encampments, which are outside downtown Winnipeg today, I would add. This is in South Pembina, West Winnipeg, Brandon, major issues in Thompson, other parts of the province that haven't seen this before. I would say that this is one of the top priorities that I've heard from Manitobans from all walks of life. And at the end of the day, the goal is I want you to come downtown to a hockey game, to a concert, to get a bite to eat, and feel proud of our downtown, to feel proud of Thompson's downtown, proud of Brandon's downtown. The way that we do that is by bringing everyone together to buy into one plan around homelessness and to remove the barriers and the silos that exist. And so that's the work that we're in the early days of. But the good news is we have a really good working relationship with the mayor of the city of Winnipeg and other municipal leaders across the province. Good relationship with the federal government, very strong relationship with the business community who care passionately about this issue. And of course, good relationships with the not-for-profit sector. So we're going to stand up housing, but the provincial government cannot stand up new social housing quick enough to deal with the humanitarian crisis we see on the streets. So we're also going to have to look at the existing housing stock. We're going to have to work with landlords. We're going to have to work with property owners, with municipal governments, with the feds to figure out how can we get people off of the streets and out of bus shacks and into housing situations as quickly as possible, and then to ensure that they have the wraparound supports, addictions, mental health, hopefully also pre-employment and job programs for some, so that they can be successful once they do move into that housing unit. And this, again, is going to be a long-term approach, but it's something that we've started on right now.
Premier Kinew speaking with Emily Brass this morning on Information Radio. Your 7-day forecast and daily lift are still to come.
Well, here is your 7-day forecast. And to some, these numbers are a relief, mild conditions, a dry forecast. To others, and I really realize this, skiers, snowmobilers, people who depend on some snow and some colder weather, it's probably not what you want to see, but it certainly is a dry forecast. We are cooler and windy by Sunday and still above seasonal into next week. Now to a holiday tradition Winnipeg families look forward to visiting every year, one that started back in 2006.
Now, at first, there was only one little shoe shop, but since then, the Elf Village in River Heights has grown. Here's your daily lift.
Hi, Hi, I'm Jen Dedelli from 242 Lockwood Street at the Elf Village. So we've done this for 17 years. This year we had to get it ready early because we got asked to have half of the village in a Hallmark movie. It was kind of exciting because the Elf Village has never been in a movie. Now we can look out for it. Just really became part of our Christmas and a lot of other people's, and I always joke around that we can't move because we have an Elf Village. We have people that come on Christmas morning. That's a tradition of theirs. We would like to welcome everyone to come down for a visit and check out some of the charities we're supporting this year. We're with Anxiety Disorders Association of Manitoba. We're helping out Cats Critters, and then at some point, by the end of the week, we'll be helping out Unsheltered with toques and mitts and scarves and all the outerwear that is needed this season. Each year, every single house gets a little something added to it that's just a little extra special or in memory of someone. For an example, someone got engaged in front of the church last year. I don't know who they are, I just know the date that it happened, so I hope they get to see their date in the church this year. So we always do a little couple of hidden messages throughout the village each year. It brings smiles to a lot of people's faces, so of course, you know, it does that for me too. Definitely come on down on we're open all day long, lights are off at 11. Everyone's welcome, and Merry Christmas.
That's so good.
Thank you so much, Jen Dedelli, and all the people who help Jen put that together.
Yeah, you know those little elf shoes, the curly ones with the... Yeah, I'm wearing mine now. You
They're
can't see them because of the desk, but they're very comfortable.
They're surprisingly, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us this evening.
See you later.